Welcome to Wandering the Nine Realms. Warning, the following video contains explicit language and or mention of traumatic or triggering details. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, I'm your host, Odin. Welcome to Wandering the Nine Realms. And today we have a special guest, an interview with a Mr. Chuck Shy, a Purple Heart recipient and retired U.S. Army veteran. He's going to tell us a little bit about his life, his story, and some of his views on the world.
Thank you, Ed.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think to get to know me a little bit, I want to start with my father, who was a Korean War veteran from the Marine Corps. Purple Heart, wounded in combat in Korea, came back, used his GI Bill, and got a degree as a pharmacist. My mother was a physical therapist, so I grew up in a household of two medical professionals. And we, being born in 65, growing up in the 70s and 80s, Dad bounced around a little bit for work. So I was born in Moberly, Missouri, moved to Texas, where we lived for about 6 years, and then to Columbia, Missouri. I think we rented a place in a little town called Oran, a population under 1,000, and ended up in Kansas City, where I went to middle school, and then moved out in the country, bought, I think it was 50 acres in Warrensburg, Missouri, where Central Missouri State University in town, and then Whiteman Air Force Base, where the B-2 bomber and fighters came, however many miles down the road, closer to where we live, out in the country. So I grew up, in a rural Midwestern environment, college town, population around 15,000. When I lived there, and most everybody knew everybody. In town, I think high school was about 550 kids, and the main street on a Friday, Saturday night had all the bars on one side with the college kids, and the other side with all the townsfolks.
Would you say that you grew up with a lot of money, or was your family poverty stricken? Or
we were by no means poverty stricken. I would say I never wanted for anything, growing up. I had a pretty good home life, both mom and dad working. We had a lot of babysitters because they were both professionals, that were working all day. But I got a drum set one year for Christmas, and so we weren't hurting in that regard. I've always had problems with my temper, though, ever since I was a little kid. In fact, I went to a Catholic school early on, and I remember an incident in the living room. I was trying to roll up one of those nylon sleeping bags, and I don't know how old I was, 6 maybe, and it kept squirting out the side, and I couldn't take it. I lost my temper. I went to the kitchen and got a knife, and I made mincemeat of that sleeping bag. But they took one of my classes away in school, and sent me to a psychiatrist for my class, to try and get my temper under control. And I still struggle with that to this day. It's been a challenge my whole life, controlling my emotions. One of the most difficult things I've ever done. But I was always, for whatever reason, maybe it was from my father who, grew up, during the Great Depression and, just the epitome of a man's man and my idol, and who I look up to and have my whole life. I'll never have his wisdom, but I've always, tried to be like him. And so maybe that's where I get it from. Just the drive and trying to never give up and to always do better. And I always feel like I'm behind, and I got to keep pushing. I think the military. I joined after high school. I joined the Army. I actually got in some trouble during school and ended up in the military, which was probably the best thing. No, probably about it, which was the best thing ever happened to me at that point in time in my life, for sure. It was ironic. I went to the station up in Kansas City, and go in and you talk to the guy there, and he says, "Well, what do you want to do? What are you here for, son?" I said, "I want to be a helicopter mechanic. I want to go to Germany. I want to leave Tuesday." And this was on a Thursday, and he said, "Slow down. Why are you rushing?" And I said, "Well, I got in some trouble, and I'd prefer to get out of town as soon as possible, so I don't get in any more trouble." And long story short, I got in the Army again with my dad's help, and I wanted to go to Germany really bad. I figured at that point in time, as an 18-year-old kid, I'd never have another opportunity to go overseas. This would be it for me. So I wanted to go to Germany. No helicopter mechanic, but I became a tank mechanic, and I went overseas. I loved it over there, other than it was colder than a well digger's ass. But I had a good time. And, at that age, there was very few things that were important to me in my life. Alcohol, women, cars, motorcycles, and drugs. And that was about it. And I didn't have a motorcycle in Germany, so we raced BMWs and chased women and drank far too much and dabbled in a few drugs over there too. I met my first wife over there, and she came back to the States. We got married, had two beautiful children, David and Jennifer, who are the love of my life today. Along with my rest of my family, my wife's boys, Justin and Brandon, Justin's wife, Kelsey, our grandson, Finn, and my daughter, Jennifer, and her husband, Mike, and their boy, his boy, Mason. My mom is still alive at 86 years old. Yeah, when her parents were ailing, she moved them into. Her and Dad bought a home in town. It was almost like a duplex, but it wasn't. But anyway, they lived in one part of the house and moved Grandma and Grandpa into the other. And Grandpa broke his hip and died, and Grandma lived to be 95. I remember Dad saying, "If I'd have known they were going to live this fucking long, I'd have never agreed to this plan." But my sister, who is the strongest person in the entire world, kind of did the same thing. She bought a big house and had my folks live with them until Dad went to a nursing home, and Mom still lives there today. She's a single mother, an occupational therapist, takes care of her 86-year-old mom, and has two girls under 10 herself. So, and has our other sister living there with her as well. So 5 shy women, in a residence in Springfield, Missouri. Look out. Um, but, she's always been a caregiver. She's got the biggest heart and the strongest will of any person I know. And she's been a role model in my life too. So despite having a really good family upbringing, great brothers and sisters, mom's still alive, I continued with these temperament that was very, I don't even know what the right word for it is, but, I felt I always had something to prove. And the defiant rebel was just the image, that was me. And I drank like no tomorrow. The friends used to say the party hadn't started until Shies puked, because I'd get so drunk I'd throw up by 9 o'clock and then get up and party until 2 or 3 in the morning. So was a very, very heavy drinker, and had a lot of talks from my dad about alcohol as a teenager. Not heeding his advice, eventually got me into some trouble that landed me in the Army after high school in 1984. And I was no different in the Army than I was in high school. And running around Germany, raising hell in a foreign country, doing things you ain't supposed to do in the Army. I got in as much trouble there as I did in the civilian world. So Germany, first duty station, straight out of high school. It's like a competition to see how much beer you can drink. This was before the euro, so we had the mark. A dollar was, like 3.6 times the spending power in Germany of what it was in the U.S. So you could, a kid making a private salary back then, which I don't remember, $700 a month maybe. It was pretty good. You get a beer and a bratwurst, a train ride up to Frankfurt to the whorehouse for the weekend. Get you a good time up there and back to the barracks, drunker and Cooter Brown, all for like $35. It was a time. And it wasn't a whole lot different when I went back, the second time. Now I'm married and got a kid, but the wife's there to take care of the kids, so I can go out partying with her brothers and friends and all that. And hell, even soldiers going to the field. The dining facility turned into the unit lounge at night, where we go play spades and drink beer till 1 o'clock in the morning and get up and go to the shooting range the next day. And that's just the way it was. And I took advantage of that and drank my share and my buddy's share and his buddy's share, probably all at the same time. So it was just a big drunken fest for me for 5 years. Split up with my time in Fort Knox in between, which wasn't much different there either. What the hell, that was 84, 85, and then came back and did 3 years at Fort Knox. Was a tank mechanic and had a test and experimentation command there, which was easy duty, no deployment or anything. We didn't even have helmets. We had to go draw a helmet from CIF when we went to a retirement ceremony. But went back to Germany after that to the exact same unit, and then to Fort Riley, Kansas. And that's where I ended up getting divorced and met my wife now, Mickey, and fell in love like never before. And through all the trials and tribulations, that woman has stuck with me for going on 28 years now. And, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her. I was always gone down the wrong path. And it wasn't because I had to, it wasn't because I was influenced by bad people. It's not that I hung around with the wrong crowd. It was just me. And, to this day, I'm not sure I know where all the anger comes from, or came from. I've always been very much an introvert. And I think that's probably why I drank. And drank so much because it relaxed the inhibitions that made me able to socialize, with other people. And the more you drank, the stupider you acted, and the more people laughed, and you thought you were popular, and life was good. And I don't know that I ever left that behavior behind as a child and became an adult somewhere along the line. I continued that behavior as a soldier, and even beyond. Always a big drinker. Love beer. Could drink 60 pounds of it in 6 months, no problem. I've done that. Um, and then it takes a year and a half to lose and get healthy again. But I was stationed at Fort Riley during the first Gulf War. Or no, I was actually stationed in Europe the first Gulf War and did not deploy. We stayed back in Kirschgoins and, guarded the community there, the military community. I was at Fort Riley the second time. And about at the end of my career, I had tried to leave Fort Riley so many times it wasn't funny. Of course, I wasn't the only one. Not many people liked it there in the middle of Kansas. I didn't mind it too bad because I grew up, less than 3 hours away from there. Hell, we could go get Dad's pontoon boat on the weekend and bring it out to Milford Lake and, camp and have the kids all weekend and take it back next week. But I was just there for too long. I tried to even go be a drill sergeant, and they said, no, you can't be a drill sergeant. You got to stay at Fort Riley for 3 years before you can leave to go be a drill sergeant. I said, okay. So I had 18 years in, and I'm looking forward to retire, and I get the orders down that says you got to go report to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to be a drill sergeant. I said, this is not what I want to do. I'm old, and these young kids nowadays will work me over trying to be a drill sergeant. And
So Chuck, you say that you're old at this point. How old are you?
36.
36.
36, Odin. Yeah. So old, relatively speaking, for a 20-year career in the Army. So I had 18 years in, and I'm 36 years old trying to conduct physical training and run with kids that are 18, 19, 20 years old, in good shape, was the point I was kind of trying to make. But the fact of the matter was I was looking forward to retirement at that time. I wasn't, I was no longer looking forward to starting something new in my military career, like becoming a drill instructor and a senior drill instructor, and et cetera, et cetera. So I really didn't want to go do it. But be careful what you ask for, because about 3 weeks after those orders came down, the unit came down on orders to deploy to Iraq. So I went to the sergeant major, who's the senior enlisted soldier in the unit, and said, "Hey, what do I do? I'm supposed to go to Fort Leonard Wood." And he said, "Don't worry about it. We'll just deploy. By the time they figure out you ain't there, we'll be in Iraq. Don't worry." So that's what I did. I probably still got a copy of those orders somewhere, but I never went to Fort Leonard Wood. We went to Iraq.
If you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe and check out more of our content. Thank you.
And we got there. We got there late. We're in an armor battalion, so we got tanks, and there's 44 M1 tanks in the battalion, and we get told we're going to deploy to Iraq and be attached to 3rd Infantry Brigade, who is already over there or in the process of deploying. So we had to take all our equipment down to the railhead and load it all up on trains to go to the port, at the coast. We're in Kansas. And then 3 weeks later, because it's supposed to take 3 weeks for that equipment to get over to Kuwait, where we're going to go draw the equipment and then roll up into Iraq. 3 weeks later, we would fly over to Kuwait and pick up our equipment. Well, 3 days later, they called and said, "Get to the battalion. We're heading to the airport. We're leaving." So we flew and landed over there without our equipment. So we had to draw equipment there in Kuwait, and they're set up to do that. And we went out and got attached to the 3rd Infantry Brigade. Well, this was probably 4 days before crossing the border, and they thought we weren't going to make it. So they had all but written us out of their plan. We were just, our orders at that point were just fall into the end of the line when we crossed the border. So here we are, a tank battalion. Tanks have big bullets, that weigh 50 pounds. And a lot of them, and that doesn't count all the machine gun ammo and hand grenades and smoke grenades and all the other things that they need to fight, not to mention the food that soldiers need to live and water. All those things hadn't really been properly planned for because they didn't think we were going to get there. So we've got about 72 hours to scramble for all this. And made it and crossed the border, but we're attached to an infantry battalion. And if you're not familiar with the military, infantry soldiers walk, mechanized soldiers drive or ride. Walking soldiers need water and food. Mechanized soldiers need oil and gas, and tanks need a lot of oil and gas. But the infantry didn't have that for us. So we were kind of on our own, although we had headquarters support from an infantry brigade. So being attached to the infantry, it wasn't long before the orders came down that they wanted us to give up 8 of our cargo trucks so the infantry soldiers can ride instead of walk. So our commander, captain, comes to me, and I was acting first sergeant at the time, and says we need to give up 8 trucks over for the infantry with driver. And I said, well, what about the truck commander that's going to go with the truck? Who's going to be the truck commander? And he said, well, the infantry folks are going to provide that. And I said, well, they're telling me, well, we're going to give up 8 trucks with drivers, and they're going to put their people in that truck with our drivers. They're going to be, lower enlisted folks, to run off and do whatever with the infantry. And we have no sort of way to ensure, from our own leadership perspective, how those soldiers are cared for. I said, I'm not really sure that's the smartest way to do this. How about we'll give up 8 trucks with the driver and truck commander for each truck. And I'm going to be the truck commander for one of those trucks, so I'm going with him. And he said, okay, go find 8 trucks. So we had to go. We were out in the desert, in a big defensive circle, and had to go find trucks that we could offload stuff into the desert, whatever cargo they may have been carrying, food, ammunition, however it was. We had to cross level what was important to keep loaded, what we needed to keep loaded if in case we had to roll out quickly, and throw the rest on the ground so we could give up these 8 trucks to go fight the war. And so we did, and off we went with the 82nd Airborne, hauling them around, kicking doors through Iraq. And I tell you, I've never been so impressed in my life as I was during that time with those infantry soldiers. Those kids could go 72 hours without sleep on nothing but 3 bottles of water. Take a break, brush their teeth, eat a meal, maybe get a nap, and do some personal hygiene, and get up and do the same thing again. And it was quite an honor to drive those guys, and be a part of that team, and to fight with those people. And we come across, I don't even remember exactly where it was now. It was an intersection, dirt road, and there was a big factory off on the northeast side, and a bunch of bushes there, and we got ambushed. And it was they knew exactly what they were doing, because the tanks rolled through first. It was a company of tanks, and then the Bradleys, there was a company or so of Bradleys, and then it was the infantry and the trucks, and I was in the lead truck, and I'd already worked it out with my driver that if we ever got hit, if we ever got ambushed, leave the truck, run, and throw it in neutral to e-brake, get out. Because if we shut it off, I don't know if we'll ever get running again. Of course, the deuce snap's not too hard to get running, but nonetheless, as soon as that lead truck come into their firing line, they opened fire on our truck, and one bullet hit the radiator. Of course, the driver did what he was told. I did the same thing, and after the ambush was on my side of the truck, so when we got hit, of course, my rifle's out the window, so I'm firing rounds into the bush, and I open the door. I'm standing on the side step firing a few rounds, and then they launched a grenade. Well, I think I'd hit the ground first, and then they launched a grenade out the bushes. It landed about, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet in front of me on the ground, and blew up, and rock and asphalt chip and all that shit, went splattering everywhere, and broke my sunglasses. Had a pair of Oakley sunglasses, and broke my sunglasses, and embedded a few rock chips in my cheek and whatnot. And of course, if you ever had a head wound or something on your face, it bleeds like, you're going to die. So everybody's freaking out that, this was the first combat action for this unit. And a whole brigade size unit, it was a big deal. And they're trying to holler for medics and get me off the firing line. Now, I don't even know I'm bleeding, and somebody comes up and said, get back to see the medic. I think it was a sergeant major or somebody, I don't know. And I said, for what? He said, you're bleeding. And I'm like, where? And so I had blood. So I walked back to the truck behind me, and I looked in the mirror on the truck, and I'm like, shit, that's just a little gravel embedded in my face. And, it's not a big deal. So I run back up, and checked on my driver. I'm on that side of the truck at that time. And, of course, most of the firing now, I don't hear anything coming from the bushes at this point, but, there was a guy off to the west of me, an infantry soldier that had his jaw shot off. It was hanging off barely, and he was needing help. And I'm debating, do I try and run through the firing line to get to him, or is somebody going to be able to come up from behind and get to him? And about that time, the brigade sergeant major walks up and these were my exact words, walked up like fucking John Wayne, grabbed a hand grenade and threw it in the bush, and that was the end of the firing. And it was the end of the two fuckers in the bush too, because when we tried to haul them out of there and bury them, we hauled them out of there in pieces. And when I went to get back in the truck, I looked right by my door, like right here by my ear is a 7.62 bullet lodged in the bed rail of the damn deuce and a half. That had to have just missed my face by 6 inches or more, depending on when it was shot. I'm assuming it was shot when I was standing there shooting at them. But nonetheless, the unit made a big deal out of it because I was the first soldier they got to give a Purple Heart to for being wounded in combat. But to me, it wasn't that big a deal. The words that kept going through my mind during that entire firefight was how I had told my wife before I left to deploy. She said, don't do anything stupid. And here I am contemplating running across the enemy firing line to get to an injured soldier because I volunteered to go with the 8 trucks. And I can assure you my wife is going to say, why did you do that? But no, honestly, she understands. The soldier was fine and I didn't get additionally hurt. The unit got to give me a Purple Heart. The reporters that were there attached to us got to write a big article about how Sergeant Shai said John Wayne walked up to a hand grenade. So my kids got an article that they can save and look at when I'm no longer around, the same way I've got one about my dad. So now we got to clean it all up and move on. But there's a bullet hole through the radiator and it's leaked, coolant out all over the ground there on the dew snap, which we had now shut off. So we opened one of our MREs, which all have bubble gum in them, and chewed up some bubble gum, and then took a cigarette butt and stuffed the cigarette butt in the radiator and packed the bubble gum over top of it and filled the radiator back up with water. And we had got some chai tea from some Iraqi police in Talil, I think it was. And we dumped those tea, and it was ground tea leaves in the radiator, so they go down there and expand like coffee does or whatever. And we fought the rest of the entire fight over there with that truck, with that radiator plug, cigarette butt, and bubble gum and chai tea. And we turned it in back in Kuwait that way when we left after the war, and it was still holding. So kind of interesting field radiator repair. But look, not everything was serious. And fighting in Iraq, not for not for guys that like to drink. We got our booze over there just the same way as soldiers in Vietnam probably got it. You know, and our guys would have their shifts of when they could drink and when they couldn't drink, and way everybody stayed sharp. But when guys want to drink, they're gonna find a way to drink, and we did. So yeah, we were fighting, but we did our having fun too while we were over there. When I came back was leap year, February 29th of 2004. And my wife had left the Christmas tree up and all the decorations on her mobile home, waiting for me to get home. And I'll never forget, hanging on the tree was the keys to her dad's 1988 Honda Prelude that I absolutely loved. Pristine car. He had given it to me for Christmas, but had a great homecoming. The kids were all there. It was the unit put on a big to-do. We were all treated like heroes when we came back, rolling out the red carpet. When we land with food and phones to call our loved ones. But we all, went through some stuff over there too that probably not many people talk about. That you got to learn to live with. My wife always used to always smell something that stinks and say, that smells like death. And I'd say, how do you know? You ever smelled what death smells like? What dead bodies, lined up in a ditch, waiting for somebody to bury them for a week because they're the wrong religion and we ain't going to bury those people. So U.S. soldiers got to go out there and dig graves. Death has a certain smell. And you don't forget it. But we get back and when I was injured over there, they send the typical telegram, just like you see in the movies. Your service member was injured in combat. And that's about all it really says. Has been evacuated and we'll keep you informed. Don't call and don't try to reach us. So, of course, Nikki gets that and, she has a fit. But we decided when I get back, I'll have my 20 years and I'm going to get out. And, because at that point in time, they were already churning for, to send units back over there again for their second rotation. So Sergeant Major and I were the only two in my battalion that were able to get our retirement paperwork in and get out before the unit was slotted to go back over there again. So I retired in 2004. And that was scary as shit too, because I'd never done anything my entire life as an adult except be a soldier and drink. And I was, here I got 2 kids and I got to take care of an ex-wife and a wife, and now am I going to get a damn job and pay child support? And I found a position as a contractor overseas and working as a mechanic. in the shop. And against career counselors' advice, don't go be a contractor, because once you're a contractor, you're always labeled as a contractor, and you'll never be able to reintegrate back into corporate America, because they'll look at you like you're just going to jump back to the next lucrative contract, and no company is going to want to make an investment in somebody like that. So my career advice was, if you're going to do it, go do it for a short period of time, not to exceed 18 months maximum, preferably a year, pay off whatever bills you can, and then come home. So I went to Qatar as a mechanic, making $14 and some change an hour. But this was as everything was winding down in Iraq, but we were still working 14-hour days, 7 days a week, 6 days a week at least. And I got a raise within 2 weeks of getting there to 16 something an hour. So that's pretty good money, overseas. And I same work ethic I'd got from my father, I assume, just work my ass off. And I don't never really concern myself with what's going on, to my left or right, unless I think it's going to affect me and what I'm, job I'm trying to do. And, I got promoted pretty quickly. Next thing you know, I'm a senior mechanic, and then they make me an inspector, and they give me my own little squad of folks. And then I'm, after that, I'm running the production control office, and then I'm the support operations manager. And, I did real well. I stayed there in Qatar for, I don't know, 3 years. Nikki came over and stayed against company policy with me. My roommate didn't give a shit. We shared a 3-bedroom house, and that's where she became really introverted. She used to be an extrovert, but kind of hiding over there and just being by herself all day and getting comfortable with that for 18 months or so. She became really introverted over there as well. But I did real good in that world, and it wasn't long before the company saw that I might have corporate potential, and I was wanting that, because the corporate employees over there could bring their wives. They were sponsored by the company. And I had actually got to a point where I'd submitted my resignation and told my boss, I'm leaving. And when they said, why? I said, well, because I can't have my wife here. And I told you a long time ago, I don't give a shit about the money here. I want to be with my family. Well, they made that happen. They promoted me. And once I got my foot in the corporate door, it clicked really quick. I was able to maneuver, and God knows how. I never go to any kind of formal college, and and wasn't a military officer. And the first conversation you walk up to in that type of industry is, where'd you command? Where'd you go to school? And they ain't talking about high school. So you got to learn how to socialize in those environments. And I can't tell you how many times I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom, in a suit and tie, because I was completely drenched from head to toe underneath and just sweat pouring all down me. So uncomfortable from the social situations that I was in. But, I was different. And I think a lot of the corporate world looked at me like, this guy has real views. And I never had any kind of agenda, and no politics behind it. I just worked hard and spoke my mind, regardless of how it might, make me sound stupid or whatnot. And that got some credibility with the right people. And the next thing you know, I'm doing pretty well. I'm an executive in the company, and then I'm a vice president. And I remember the words of one of my mentors and good friends from many, many years back. He said, the quickest way to get fired is become a vice president. Um, and I didn't understand it, but I do now, because there's a whole different side of corporate industry, at least in my experience, and that's been over a decade, that is hateful and backstabbing, and as ugly as war. The things that people will do to one another to advance their own agenda is unthinkable. And I was so not naive, but totally ignorant. Like, I didn't know any of this kind of stuff was part of the game. In fact, we get paid for who we know, not what we do. And that should have been a sign. But maybe that was naivety on my part. But I made a really good run, and I wasn't perfect. So I'm not trying to shed any of my blame in the ending of my corporate career, because I own a part of that myself. It'd be nice if the people that have a part in it would own theirs as well, but that won't happen. But it was a learning experience for me that made me kind of reevaluate my life. And I think we all kind of did this after COVID. Uh, People took a look at what's really important to them. Um, at least I know the folks overseas did. There was, you just can't imagine, of all the stories you hear about in the United States, some of the more impoverished countries, especially in the Middle East, at least that's where my experience is, it was 10 times as bad. But, it made me kind of think about who I am and where I'm at in my life and what I'm doing next. Because when I got laid off or let go at 59 years old, with 11 months to have my retirement vest, 2 weeks before Christmas last year, I got to think about how am I going to pay my mortgage? And how do I really want to live the rest of my life? And my close friends and family, are asking each other, has Chuck gone crazy with some of my recent behavior? But, and I'm not trying to make an excuse here, I'm just explaining maybe. all of us have a story to tell, and everybody has gone through their hardships and challenges in life, and no one's are more important than anyone else's. Others may be more significant, especially when measured in different ways. But, I was a soldier at 18, a husband at 20, and a father at 21. And not necessarily by my choice, but by the choice I made to act the way I did and do the things that I did. And I never really got that time period at a young age to figure out who and what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I'm certainly not the only one in the world like that. I've got, many, many friends that were fathers at 16. A buddy of mine said, I've never been to a strip club single, because he's been married since he was 17 or 16. So many of us had never really got that chance, but I have that chance now, and I'm taking it, because I've learned through all these years that the way I've lived my life is definitely not the smartest way to do it, but kids nowadays have got it figured out because they plan, and execute the plan pretty well. My only plan was to be the first person to work every day, be the hardest person at work every day, be the last person to leave every day, be friendly and kind to everybody, and help all those that I can. Um, and that got me to where I am, but that only gets you so far.
So with the heavy drinking that started pretty early, how long did that persist on, or has it came to an end, or do you still have
Yeah.
drink now?
So, Odin, thanks. That's a good point because, being a mechanic in Qatar when I first started, it continued on over there. I mean, we couldn't wait for the 9:15 break whistle to blow so we could go sit in the van and take a 15-minute nap because we were all hung over as shit from the night before. And then it got to be less, of course, as I matured some. But my sister will tell you I've still got a lot of maturing to do, and she's probably right. But alcohol has always been a prominent relationship in my life. My dad quit drinking when I was really, really early, really, really young, because alcoholism has ran in our family, and he didn't want that to be. He wanted to bring that to us kids. But I still drank a lot and often. Even as a vice president, an executive of the company, our big corporate events, up until a few years ago where there was multiple incidents of people showing up drunk during a damn corporate leadership conference. Alcohol was always a big part of that culture as well. I think it always has been. I doubt it always will be, but it's like cigarettes. It's not the fashion anymore like it was. But after COVID, I came back to the United States. Actually, during COVID, I came back to the United States. Kuwait shut down the borders because of COVID, couldn't get back, worked from home several years. That was a whole debacle. But, COVID, the gym is closed because it's not whatever they called it, essential, but the liquor store ain't closed. So, Chuck's in hog heaven. Now I'm working behind a computer every day. Like I don't have to see employees or my bosses unless it's across the screen, and the liquor store's open and the gym's closed. So yeah, I gained 60 pounds and was in terrible shape. Couldn't tie my fucking shoes. It was bad, and I go to a checkup at the doctor, and my lab work, he says your liver enzymes are all out of whack. So, of course, my wife, Google doctor, fuck, you're dying, you got cirrhosis of the liver, quit drinking. Of course, every single problem I've ever had in my life, by the way, has been because of alcohol. As a kid, with my first wife, and with my wife now, and so I'm like, shit. I go back to the doctor. He sends me for an MRI, and that comes back, and he says, I can't see anything. You have too much fat on your liver. You need to lose some weight and go take a year, lose some weight, and come back in a year, and we'll do another MRI. So I'm like, fuck, do I got to quit drinking, doc? And he's like, well, I can't tell you to quit drinking, but that might be a good idea. So with that pressure and 20 plus years of pressure from my wife, I said, okay, I'm gonna quit drinking. And I did, cold turkey. For a year, I lost 60 pounds. Of course, the gym eventually opened up, so I got back into the gym. I've always been a kind of a gym guy off and on for my whole life. And lost the weight, go back, and then I had to take an ultrasound. Long story short, I got a birthmark on my liver. There's a medical term for it, but that's the gist of it. But a year went by with no booze, and I felt great, and I'm in good shape. I'm working out with guys in their 40s, and life's good. Well, I started drinking again, and I didn't, and I never have. It's going on like 3.5 years. Yeah, I've had a drink, uh, a celebratory toast, not an occasional drink, and I'll never go back to drinking again. And it's taken me my lifetime to admit that I'm an alcoholic. But I can admit that now, and quitting drinking was one of the best things that I've ever done in my life. It's coupled with the reflection on all of my life and how I want to live the however many years I have left. Had me to reevaluate and reprioritize what's important to me, which I had never put much thought to. It's always just, ass down, head up, go to work. And taking that to the next step, and easier said than done, but eliminating all the things that get in the way of the way I want to live my life and who I want to be for my last years. So I don't know that I've figured it out yet, but when I do, I'll let you know. But I'm having a lot of fun at 59 going through the process of learning who I want to be when I grow up.
All right, Chuck, we're at the section of our show where I like to ask 3 specific questions and get your feedback on those questions. The first question is going to be, what would you say is your biggest regret in your life?
That's a pretty easy one for me. Drinking. My dad told me at a very, very young age it was going to be a problem.
So, with that being said, the next question comes along. What would you say is your biggest achievement in life? Sure, you have plenty, but
Yeah,
if you had to put a finger on it.
that's. I love that question because the answer to it gives you some insight into people's values. If you ask somebody, what's their biggest achievement, it's kind of subjective as to what's an achievement. Some Evil Knievel might say he jumped X amount of buses, right? Uh, so it depends on how you measure success, I guess, as to what your biggest achievement might be. But for me, again, it's a pretty simple question, and that's my marriage to Mickey for going on 28 years now, and it has never been easy. Is because of my drinking. I have reevaluated what's important to me, and that is my happiness. And that doesn't mean fuck anything and everybody that doesn't make me happy. But what it does mean is the things in my life that are detracting from me being happy are getting cut out of my life. So if and I've kind of had to come up with some values to figure out what's important, right? So if family is what's important to you, if your marriage or your current marriage is what's important to you, mine is, then anything that is detracting from that is ultimately detracting from your happiness, and you need to cut it out of your life. And like I said, that's easier said than done. It's not saying, well, work don't make me happy, so I ain't going to fucking work. And I got out of the one I was in not by my choice, by the choice of the company, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me because I didn't really belong there to start with. I just didn't know it at the time.
So it sounds like you've went through a lot of trials and tribulations, and you've learned a lot and overcame a lot, especially alcoholism. You've accepted that that was a bad thing in your life, and you've moved past that. It moves on to the last question that I have, and that would be, if you had a few short words or some kind of quote that you could give the world and inspire them, or maybe teach them something that old age and wisdom's brought to you, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Odin. Live your life for you, and you got to figure that out. But it's funny. I've had this conversation with my son, and I don't get to have a whole lot with him. I haven't made the opportunity to have a whole lot with him. But, I learned this from him. He has forever been the most uncaring, like, I don't give a shit about anything outside of my bubble. And his bubble is like, his sphere of influence is this big. And anything outside that bubble, he don't care about money. He didn't care about getting a driver's license. He said, Dad, I got a skateboard. What do I need a car for? He didn't care. Video games has been his life, and that's what he loves, and that's his joy. And he'll never have a mansion in the sky and drive a Porsche and give two shits about it, but he'll be fucking happy. And I envy that boy so much. I put it on Facebook today. I just got a Facebook account like a month ago. I learn more from my kids than they've ever learned from me. He just lives his life to do what makes him happy, not what he thinks he's supposed to do to make other people happy. And when you get to be my age and you're looking at less years in front of you than you got behind you, that message carries a lot more weight than when you're 20. But, he did it from the day one. He graduated high school. He got a job. He saved his money. He met a girl online in New Zealand playing a fucking video game on Xbox. And, quit his job and moved to New Zealand. And I'm like, how envious was I? A 19-year-old kid, just boom, I was in the Army, fucking married. And, I never got to do that shit. Because that's what he wanted to do. And you just be so much happier if you can figure out a way to live your life doing the things that make you happy. Because if you're doing the things that, you think you need to do to make other people happy, it's not going to work out. The fame, the fortune, the likes, the whatever all that gets you, for me, it's not worth it. My circle of give a shits about this big. And if I call you a brother or a sister, you're in that circle. And if I don't, you ain't. And that'd be the best way to live if I could leave you with one piece.
Chuck, I think those are brilliant words, and that's going to conclude today's interview. Thank you for your time. You have anything else you'd like to say?
I appreciate you having me. Thank you, Odin. And I don't know if my story is able to help anyone out there, but I'm not looking for anything out of it. But if you could resonate with anything I said today, then like and subscribe. I know Odin would appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Chuck. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate
your time today, bro.
Appreciate that.